Hello, everybody. Welcome to yet another episode. Now, I know we're getting a little bit of a following here, so I hope this hasn't been too long for you. We're keeping them at weekly, and that's tough. You're just going to have to deal with that. But we're really pleased, to be honest. We're getting some great feedback. So, without any further time hesitation here, Stephen's given me another blinder. This is a real big one for me. It's one of my all-time favourites that he suggested already. Expectations. So, without me jumping in, because I'm really busting a gut to do it. Why did you come to me with expectations as the title for our first pod of the day? Hit me with it.
Hi everyone, and welcome again. Yes, I'm smiling very wide because when I mentioned the topic to Oliver about expectations, he was almost firing out of his seat with excitement. It was one that really hit home. And for me, it's really interesting because what I've been finding over the last few months is a lot of the people I've been mentoring have been really talking about expectations in terms of what people expect from them and them setting expectations in order that they can just live better. And one of our biggest issues, I think, in life is we presume too much. We're always presuming. We don't set the expectation, and then when it's not delivered, we then get upset about it. Or someone asks something of us, and we're so quick to say yes or no, we haven't really set the expectation. If you don't set the expectation, how do you know what's been achieved and whether it's good enough if you haven't set it in the beginning? So that's where I'm coming from, Oliver. Now I'm going to do a little 3, 2, 1 countdown because
Yeah,
I can just see you're bursting to really
yeah,
get into this one.
yeah.
So 3, 2, 1, go, Oliver.
Right. So this one is something that it came my way explained like this a few years ago. I'd love to take full credit for this, but I cannot. It's a really cool American coach called Steve Chandler who first verbalized this to me. Whether he's the person who first did it, I don't know. But with expectations, they're toxic, right? And hear me out. The reason being, there are only two outcomes when you have expectations of people. One is that someone meets your expectations, and the feeling is a very level, average. Well, I expected that, so fine. Or they fail to meet your expectations. Now, the consequences of that are obviously you're disappointed. That individual or group of people might not even know that they have failed to meet expectations because what haven't we done? We've never spoken about it. We haven't communicated it. In our heads, those expectations are bloody obvious. But if you've never spoken to the other person or the people involved about it, half of them haven't got a bloody clue. Now you'll be sitting there listening to this thinking, come on, no, it's really obvious. Now you're, say, a business owner, the perfect example, the major criminals for having expectations. You know the standards of what you expect your business to be. But if you're not communicating that well and the culture's not quite right, there's a very good chance that you have expectations which are up here. And for those listening, my hands are like way above my head. But everybody else thinks that the standard is okay. And my hand's now just about underneath my chin. So if you're at two completely different levels and you've never made it clear to people what you expect from them, how on earth do you think that that's going to somehow balance out and equate and meet in the middle? But when you do this magical thing and start communicating with people, having a conversation about what your expectations are, and then listen to their views of what their possibilities are and what their expectations are, you can suddenly reach this magical thing called an agreement, where it's clear what you're looking for, it's clear what the other person can deliver. And more importantly, when someone fails to meet your expectations, I can guarantee you they're pissed off. And they're not pissed off because they failed to meet them. They're pissed off because you had them and they never spoke to you about them. Whereas if you reach an agreement with someone, they will fight tooth and nail to make that agreement. People hate failing to meet agreements, but they hate being told they failed to meet expectations. So I could go on for hours about this. But what do you think about that? So for me, expectations are toxic. They have no place in life. This isn't just at work. This is in family environments, friend circles, everything like that. If you're sitting there thinking someone should have done that, or if it was me, I would have done this, but you've never spoken it, then it's your fault, no one else's.
No, that resonates so much, Oliver. And what it closely sort of links to is you have to communicate and you have to make time. I think what sometimes happens is we don't talk about the expectation because we're too quick to think about what needs to be done, the action, what am I going to get from this? And we don't spend the time sort of explaining and giving the detail. And I guess we're all guilty of this sometimes. We're so quick to want the action or that thing done. We haven't given the detail. And because we haven't given the detail, the expectation information is not there. Also, I do think sometimes you have to take the time to think about, what do I want to get out of this? What's the outcome I want? And what information do I need to deliver to that person in order for the outcome to be met? I don't think we spend enough time thinking about that. And because we don't do that, we just assume. And it's probably the assume bit is the bit that really is a bugbear of mine, because it's almost like you haven't taken the time. You just think this is going to happen, and actually it's not going to happen because you haven't thought about it. So shame on you.
Yeah.
The negative about this though is the person can feel very low because they feel like, well, you didn't explain that to me, and now I haven't delivered it, and now I feel pretty crap about myself.
Yeah.
So I think it's two ways really. I think both parties have to ask a little bit more of the other person. And this is why I always say, when someone asks you a question or they say something, think about it and think about the delivery of that. Have you been given enough information in the first instance? And have you got the time to actually do that and communicate it? So it's very close link for me to communication and time. How many times you've been in a situation and one person thinks of X, that's what's going to be done, and it doesn't get done because the expectation wasn't met. So that's what it really resonates with me, Oliver.
Yeah, absolutely with you on that. I mean, when you first brought it up in like the first minute, you used the word presume and assumption. Well, I definitely use assume anyway, and I picked that up because that's one of the words that I use with people. It's kind of like the lazy version of expectations. It's a bit softer, isn't it? But you assume certain things. And I give a perfect example. Those who follow me will have heard this one before, but I'll talk about my son when he was a teenager. And I'd made a decision that he's now, pushing 16, 17. He needs to pull his weight around the house. So I decided that he's doing the bins. Now, I was an expert bin guy. I knew when they needed to be emptied. I knew how I would check on them being taken down to the dry to be picked up by the binman. Never missed a bin pickup. And I suddenly gave this honour to my son Matt, with the full expectations that he's a clever lad, he'll know what to do, but never once had he been responsible for the bins. So, sure enough, I'd come to the bin one day and the food bin would be full and it'd be a bit smelly, and I'd be, what the hell is going on? Why haven't you emptied the food bin? Then another thing is I'd hear the bin lorries come and I think, I'm not hearing our bins going, and I'd be running down to Matt, have you taken the bins out this morning? And when I heard this podcast episode by Steve Chandler, I suddenly realised what I'd done, because no matter how easy it might seem to do the bins, I had a certain way that they were done that meant that we wouldn't miss bin days, that they were cleared every day. Certain, you wouldn't let the bin get too full, all these sorts of things. But I'd never told Matt. I'd just decided one day, because, I'm a great parent and he needs to pull his weight more, that he was doing the bins. Did he A, want to do the bins? Absolutely not. Did he B, have any idea what I'd been doing with the bins up to that point? Also absolutely not. And had he got any pride in the job? Most certainly not. But did he want to upset me? No. Was he willing to do it? Yes. But I hadn't told him how to do it. I just said, here you go, bins is your responsibility. And I presumed that he would then think, well, they need to be done daily. I need to make sure that I do this. I need to check the app to make sure I don't miss the bit. All these assumptions, because that's what I would do. But this is like, at the time, late 30-year-old me versus 17-year-old boy who's only ever really worried about Xbox and scraping through his GCSEs. It was madness. But the worst thing of it is, it's all my fault. I thought, oh, that's ridiculous. I can't believe, Matt. But it was 100, not even like 99%. It's 100% my fault, because I never communicated with him. I had so many expectations and I assumed he would know what he was doing. And I know that's a really silly example, but I bet we can replicate that in our personal lives with family, with friends, and in our business lives. I bet to certain degrees and levels that is done every day by people who think that, not that they're better than other people, it's too far, but they just think that they're in the right. And every single time, I mean it, every single time you expect, presume, or assume something for you, it's your fault. Absolutely no one else's. So yeah, you can see I'm still riled by it because honestly, the amount of times I get new clients who talk to me about their staff not being able to do things or what have you, and it's like, okay, so what are you hearing here? The old-fashioned coaching question. So well, they're obviously not up to it. I said, no, no, really, what you? And eventually they get down. It's like, oh, it's me, isn't it? So, ding, bingo, it's you. And honestly, it makes me so frustrated that we all get to such a time in life before we realise that. And when I first heard it from Steve Chandler, I was like, how is this the first time that that's ever been articulated to me? How? I mean, I was about 36, 37. It's the first time I'd ever thought about it. Oh, maddening. But now I'm just angry. Now I'm just angry about it. Anyway, what's your experience?
Those of you that are listening can't see. Those of you that are watching video will be able to see the animation from
There's
Oliver.
lots of hand
And I'm
movements.
laughing because I'm staring at him and it's just I've never seen him so animated. It's
Yeah.
brilliant. No, no. What that's really woken up in me is something that's happened with both of my children actually when they were younger. So I'm a bit of a short person at 5'9" for a male, and I have two children that are quite tall. And both my son and my daughter, when my daughter's still young, but when my son was young, the similar age, they're quite tall for their age. So what happens is people expect them to do more because they look like they're older. My daughter's very confident. She talks very, very, very well. She's very interactive and engaging. So what tends to happen is the expectation of the adult generally that's communicating with her is, oh, she is 10, when actually she's only 7. And so then they expect them to be able to do more things because they've already set in their mind that actually this is the age that she is. And this is another way in which expectations can be quite damaging because the expectation of the adult, of the child, is far too great. And it was similar for my son when he was that age as well. So you can see how expectation can take on lots of different forms, lots of different connotations, and it can actually impact in terms of how someone feels. Because if you think about my daughter and my son scenario, they could feel inadequate because an adult expects them to be able to do more because of their height and because they've assumed that they're older than what they are, rather than asking the question. Another one. So I love animals. I absolutely adore animals. And all you animal lovers that are listening to this will know where I'm coming from, especially if you've got a dog, where you'll be walking and all of a sudden someone thinks it's okay to put their hand in the dog's face and just go and stroke the dog. Their expectation is that is fine to do. The dog might not react in the way that they want the dog to react, but the expectation is, oh, we can do that to every single dog. You dog owners will know you should always ask the owner first, is it okay to do X, Y, Z? And then you lower your hand into a position so the dog can smell you first, so that he or she or dog feels comfortable, and then you're allowed to then stroke it. But again, that's another area where your expectation is because you've done that to one dog, you can do it to all dogs. And that's just another example, really, of expectations and how it can actually be quite detrimental.
Yeah, that's a really cool one actually, because that's really close to home. Because I've had some dogs, and one of them is really nervous. It's the cutest thing. It's a tiny little Yorkie poo. It's my daughter's. We call it our daughter's anxiety dog. Bought it for her just before the first lockdown, and I've had to get a harness that says nervous on it because she's so cute. People are coming down to her. These big people, like 6 foot people, coming down to this tiny little dog that's probably this, maybe 8, 9 inches tall at the most, and she absolutely craps herself. And she'll reel back, and she's got really, really nervous from it. And I didn't really think about the impact that would be having on her. But now she doesn't. She's all right with walks now, but for a while she was really terrified going for a walk. And having it putting it like a yellow harness on it is like there's codes that mean different behaviours and stuff for dogs, from what I'm told. But it has nervous written all over it, and you can see people reach down and they're like, oh, is it all right to talk to her? I said, yeah, it is, but just go in slow. She loves a cuddle, but she doesn't love someone just jumping down on her head and so forth like that. So yeah, absolutely resonate with the dog analogy as well. But it's, kids, dogs, employees, friends, partners. That's a really good example. When you're in a relationship, everybody, I think, is well. No, that's harsh. Lots of people are guilty of having expectations a large amount of the time. However, I suppose the first sort of 15 minutes or so has been quite negative in terms of like bad you people for having expectations. So what's the solution? People will say, and it's not. It's about as it's it's about as easy as it can be, but it's also not if you don't like talking. Because honestly, the only way round this is to communicate. Maybe send out stuff in advance of whatever you're going to do. So you can send emails or you can send videos, if it's work or if it's something you want your partner to talk to you about. Give information ahead of time. Don't spring the question on them. Don't be too eager for an answer. So therefore, you have to consider how much time do you need to give people. But ultimately, it's good old fashioned communication, isn't it? Be able to speak about it. But again, if you're then thinking, oh, okay, that's all right, well, I'll just agree with everybody, I'll go in and have a meeting and then we'll reach an agreement. That's a similar thing. You've still got an expectation that you'll go into a meeting and come out with an agreement. But if you haven't given people information as a result of that, especially in the work environment, you're hacking to the expectations role. So you expect the people will agree with you based on you calling them to a meeting, and at the end of that meeting, I've decided that you should have enough information to make that decision. That also doesn't work with everybody. So it's about being a better communicator. And people, some people listen to this won't like it because it will really hit home that they're not as good at what they at management of situations as they thought they did. So it also takes a little bit of humility to realize, oh, actually, I haven't been doing that very well. And I'm not, it is a work focused area, but I am not intending to concentrate solely on work, because that can be the same for your home life in many ways, shapes, or form. But work's an easier example, isn't it? So if any of these things are resonating with you, I honestly, I plead and beg with you to give people more information and communicate with them more regularly, and to not go into meetings with people expecting them to agree with you. That's not what we're saying. Does that seem fair?
No, it does, Oliver. And looking back over my career, some of the best meetings I've been involved in is when the meeting has started with what's the expectation from everybody in the room today. Those expectations go up, and then we go back to those expectations at the end of the meeting to see if they've been met. Also, when you think about behavior, sometimes if you don't do that whole behavior bit in the beginning to explain to everybody, this is how we want to run this today, this is how we want it to work today, you're creating the expectation, and by creating expectation, that just delivers itself just more positively, and the outcome then becomes more positive. But you're right, Oliver, the only way to do this is to communicate, is to plan beforehand, is to be clear and concise, and to check. The amount of times I just do a simple, is that okay? Does that make sense? Is that enough time? Do you feel comfortable? And it's things like this that allow you to meet the expectation because you've delivered the right information in the first place. So it is about time, it is about communication, it is about forward planning sometimes. I think that's really important to plan beforehand. So some tips there on how to manage expectations. And don't be afraid sometimes as well to say no.
Mm, yeah. Yeah, well, I think that's likely to be an episode for the future, isn't it? The power of no, because that's huge. So many people are fearful of what that means. So, absolutely. So, I hope, coming towards the end of this episode, that you don't feel got at and attacked, because I sometimes do come across a little bit riled on it. But honestly, it does pee me off. So I can't pretend that isn't part of what I'm looking to try and do, because like I say, a lot of people fall into the trap, but a huge number of the people that are guilty of it are the people in senior positions, not necessarily owners of business, but people in positions of relative power of different degrees, and it's not cool. It really isn't. Because if people don't feel they can talk to you and so forth, it's actually, you're not getting the best out of them. You're not getting the best version of those people around you, and you're certainly not being the best version of yourself. So, no, it's a proper little passion project of mine. That's one of the first ever podcast episodes I did was on expectations versus agreement. So, I'll stop now. Any final points from you? Because we've just gone over the 20-minute mark. I think I've said more than enough. Any final thoughts from you, Stephen?
I would just say keep communicating and don't expect.
Beautiful. Love that. Right. Thanks for listening, guys. We're really pleased everybody's enjoying these. We're going to end this one now, and we will see or speak to you at the next one. Cheers, guys.